in chapter 18, verse 13. Vayhimi macharas, and it was the next day. Vayeshev Moshe l'shpot ha'am, and Moshe sat down to judge the people. Vayamod ha'am al Moshe min haboker ad ha'erev, and the people stood over Moses from morning until evening. So says Rashi, what does it mean? It was the next day. What day are we even talking about? Very, very, very important Rashi. Rashi says, Motzei Yom HaKippurim Haya. It was the day after Yom Kippur. Kach Shaninu b'Sifrei. That's what we learn in the Sifrei. It was the day after Yom Kippur. What does this mean, the day after Yom Kippur? When did they have Yom Kippur? They left Pesach. So how are we suddenly all of a sudden at the end after Yom Kippur? How did we get to there Yom Kippur?
The second tablets, he came down after the second set of tablets came down on Yom Kippur.
So all of a sudden, when are we talking about then? That Yisro came to them after the second set of tablets? Yeah. So that's what I'm saying, is what Rashi is saying here. Then this is a big problem, because the story of the golden calf and the giving of the commandments at Sinai, the giving of the commandments at Sinai immediately follows this passage. But according to Rashi, that's not what's going on. It's the second that Yisro came actually after the second set of tablets, much, much, much later than is appearing right here. Chapter 18, verse 13. So that's a big, so Rashi is saying that this verse is out of order, very much out of order. Look what Rashi says. Motzei Yom HaKippurim Haya. It was the day after Yom Kippur. So, Kal Shaminu b'Sifri. And Rashi says, this is what we have learned in the Sifri. Umal mimacharas. What does it mean the next day? Umacharas ridato minahar. The day after Moses descended from the mountain, after having received the tablets on Yom Kippur. Hold on one second. Somebody's trying to join, and they asked me for the link. So I'm sending it to them.
What's the problem?
On what? I can't see from here. But that's 8. But you have to know that if anybody here is eating a grape or a fig, we have grapes and figs there. They are part of the Shivat Haminim. They're part of the 7 species. So it's still a Borei Pri Ha'etz beforehand, but then afterwards you have to make a special bracha achrona called Al Ha'etz, which is like, and here's a bencher there to say that special blessing, because the 7 species require a special bracha achrona. Okay, so what's the next day? Vayeshev Moshe. So what we're saying is, in Ev Shar Omar Al Mimacharas Yom Kippur, Rashi says we are forced to say, we have no choice but to say that this was the day after Yom Kippur. Sharei Kodem Matan Torah, because before Matan Torah, Ev Shar Omar, it's impossible to say Vodati as Chukai. It's impossible to say that what it says, because Moshe Rabbeinu says that if when they have Moshe was explaining to Yisro, when they have a matter that's difficult to me, then I make known God's laws. So Moshe was explaining to Yisro the way you judge the people. Well, you can't judge the people until you have a set of laws. So what law was he doing? So therefore, it had to be after the Torah was given. And from the fact that the Torah was given until Yom Kippur, Moshe never was able to sit down to judge the people, meaning to say, from Shavuos until Yom Kippur, Moshe was never there. Where was he? Moshe Rabbeinu went up on the 6th day of Sivan, and for the 10 commandments. He came down on the 17th of Tammuz, which was 40 days later, and that's when he broke the tablets. And then the next day he went up the mountain early in the morning. He was up the mountain and he stayed for 80 days. He really didn't stay straight for 80 days. He went down after 40 days and then went up again the next day. But we see from here, that's based on Rashi elsewhere, so therefore, Moshe Rabbeinu went down then for the last time on Yom Kippur. So Moshe Rabbeinu, the entire time, he was from Shavuos to Yom Kippur, he was basically up on the mountain the entire time, except for when he went down to break the tablets or to make the new tablets. He never had time to judge the people. So therefore, Rashi says it has to be that he's talking about a case after Yom Kippur. But what's the reason why you can't say it's talking about from Pesach till Shavuos? So Rashi says because they didn't have any laws to judge the people. But then we have a big problem. You mean to say from Pesach to Shavuos there were no legal disputes? Nobody was arguing? Nobody was fighting with each other. And we have to say yes, that this was the honeymoon period, not only for the Jewish people leading up to Sinai, but also for the people as a whole, that they had such achdus, they had such unity with the Jewish people, that they were all unified with each other, that there was no fighting at all, that there was no sense of division. Nobody was fighting with each other. There was no judgment, no cases to be judged. What a geschmack. Messianic, ready for the moment of revelation. Okay, so this obviously this is Rashi then continues. This passage is not written in order. Why? Because it was not. This passage of Ahima Macharas was not said until this second year. I mean, it took place so therefore he's saying which Yom Kippur is it falling? Was it falling on? Not the first Yom Kippur, which was the day after he got the tablets, but it must be a year later. That's what he's saying. No, excuse me, not saying a year later, but he's saying in the second calendar year after Rosh Hashanah. So meaning it's taking place like 7 months after they left, 6 months after they left Egypt, in the month of Tishrei, not in the month of Nisan when they left. So it's basically saying it's taking place 6 months after they left. And even according to the one who says Yisro came prior to Matan Torah. So what is Rashi referring to here? Rashi just said Yisro came after Matan Torah. So there's this dispute in the Talmud in Avodah Zarah 24a and Zvachim 116a when Yisro came. Even though Yisro was discussing when Moshe was judging the people here, he might have come earlier. So one opinion is that the entire passage of Yisro came, that he arrived after Yom Kippur. So then he did not join the Jewish people until after the Torah had given. According to another approach that says he came before the giving of the Torah, this passage still takes place afterwards. His being sent to his land, this is in verse 27. If we look at that verse, what does it say? It says, Moshe sent his father-in-law, and he went off to his land. So that concept that Yisro went back to his land, that was in the second year after Yom Kippur, because it states, "Vayishalach Moshe eschos." No, Moshe sent his father-in-law off. Umatzina b'masa degolim. And we find in this passage of when they're journeying in the wilderness with the flags, Sha'amar lo Moshe, And Moshe turns to Yisro and he says to him, Nosim anachnu el makom. Al nataz overton. Moshe turns to Yisro and he says, we're traveling to the place. Do not abandon us. V'imzo kodem Torah. And if this passage of Yisro's return was really prior to Matan Torah, Misha Shilucho v'halach, from when he sent him off and left, Hechon matzinu shechazar. And where did he return? V'im tomar shamo nemar Yitro el chovav. Maybe you want to say that there it doesn't say Yitro, it says chovav. Ubeno shel Yitro haya, and Yisro, and chovav was Yisro's son. Hu chovav, hu Yisro. They're the same person because it says mi b'nei chovav chosei Moshe. So Yisro, so Rashi's argument, and this is not the approach of all the commentaries, Rashi's argument is that this passage is written out of order, that this passage takes place after the golden calf, after the second tablets, Moshe came down, and it was only then that Yisro either arrived, or even if those people arrived who said that he arrived earlier, which is the dispute in Talmud, it's certainly, according to everybody, that was the only time that there was the discussion of the judges, only after Moshe came down with the Torah.
Does anyone try to broach the topic of why is Yom Kippur introduced here in the first place to create all these different theories?
No, Rashi says it was the day after Yom Kippur.
Yeah, but wow.
Because that was the first time that Moshe was there, because from Shavuos till Yom Kippur. So right now, if the only way you could say it is that there's two times Yisro could have had this conversation with Moshe. Either he could have had it between Pesach and Shavuos,
right,
or he could have had it the day after Yom Kippur. But between Pesach and Shavuos, they didn't have the Torah yet. So what would be Moshe be judging them? So therefore, he says it has to have happened the day after Yom Kippur. Also, there's another theory that says that Yisro, that Moshe sent away Yisro, and so that has to be again only after Yisro came.
Right.
So according to this Rashi, it's very 1 second. According to this Rashi, Yisro left. Moshe begged Yisro to stay, and Yisro still left.
Yeah, in
Bamidbar.
He's leaving, and
yeah. I'm sorry.
That's a year later.
Well, Rashi's saying that that conversation happened right around this time. He came for a day and then he left. So according to this approach, but read the significance of what Rashi is saying, that Rashi is saying Moshe's own children weren't at Har Sinai. All the Jews were there except for Moshe's own children. Wow. Yeah, Rabbi Yosef, I cut you off and I deeply apologize for that.
No, that's okay. I was just saying that Rashi himself said that in Mara we got Mishpatim. So those could be rules that he law before Matan Torah.
Right. So what did he say? He said, Rashi says, in Mara, Sham Samo Choku Mishpat. He gave him
he said was Dimin Mavit Ben Anafavero.
Right. That's an excellent question. And that he says to him.
I'm not saying that Rashi isn't consistent. I'm just saying that it sounds like he's trying to push that the Torah is not written in order, which is not his usual manner. So
let's go back to that Rashi. He says in the Rashi, it says, let's go back to, it says, Asher Samcha Kol, so he says, they came to Mara, and then they had the bitter water, and so what does he do there? It says, hold on. What's the pasuk? Oh, here we go. Asher Samuel Choku Mishpat. And he gave them their monetary claims. It says it explicitly. It says there he gave them Shabbos Paraduma Vidinin. So it could have been. So you're right, Rabbi Yosef. That's an excellent point. Why is Rashi pigeonholed into arguing that they didn't have any laws when they had the civil laws? I don't know. You see, I asked my son, Roey, to go to the Svarim cell at YU to get me this Mikros Gedolos with 11 Meforshe Rashi, with 11 Rashi commentaries. But he hasn't been, he didn't see it there last night. He's emailing them to see if they have it. We have to get that book. Then we'd have 11 commentaries and we could check that question right there. A very good question from Rabbi Yosef. Very good question. Excellent. At least to my mind, it's excellent, but we'll see what their commentaries say. Okay, so maybe you could check the Siftei Chachamim, Rabbi Yosef. Okay, so now the next verse tells us, the Rashi tells us, Vayeshev Moshe. Moshe was sat there and the people stood. Rashi tells us, Yoshev Kamelach. Moshe was sitting like a king. Mikulan omed him, and everybody was standing. V'huksha Davar Yisro. Matter was very disturbing to Jethro. He was belittling the honor of Israel. As it states, why do you alone sit while all those who come before you stand? So that's another question that we have. That's exactly the halacha. If you come to a bezdin, the dayan sits and the other people stand. So why is he upset? I guess the problem is that they were standing all day. Think about this next time you go to the DMV and you wait online for 3 hours.
The clerk is named Moses.
I know the clerk is named Moses. He thinks he's Moses. They don't always have enough seats. Let me just tell you that much. Last time I showed up at the DMV, I was outside. They didn't have. That's how few seats they had.
Just the DC.
I'm not saying anything bad about the DC DMV. The person who's the director is a very nice woman who, as a result of that encounter, I became good friends with her because I emailed my displeasure with the system. Okay, so it says that they stood over Moshe and Boker out of error from the morning until the evening. Rashi says, Efshar wa markin. Is it really possible to say that Moshe did nothing but judge the people the whole day? Ella teaches us called Dayan Shedon Din Emes Lamitu Afil Shah Achas Ma'ol Avakosav Ki Osik B'Torah Kol Yom. If a judge judges anything truthfully, it's as though he was involved in Torah all day. Ukiwa Nasa Shutaf HaKadosh Baruch Hu B'Maaseh Bereishis, as though he became the partner of God in the creation story. As it says, Vayi Erev, Vayi Boker, was there evening and morning. So Moshe was there from the morning to the evening, just like God was there from the evening to the morning. Being a judge, a true judge, is the equivalent of creating the world. You're like the creation of the world. You're the partnership of God. It shows you that the most important thing is to have a good judicial system. If you have a country without an independent judicial system, then the country is in huge trouble. That's when I went to Venezuela over a decade ago, and the chief rabbi of Venezuela said, our country is in major trouble because there's no independent judicial system anymore. And when the judicial system just becomes a puppet of the dictators, then you're in trouble. Even if you have judges who don't give good opinions, if they're independent, you take that over a judge who gives the right opinion, even if he's not independent.
Maduro was the head of the cartel.
Yeah. No. When I went there, Chavez was in charge. It was way worse. He's the one who caused all the problems. Okay, so now Vayar Jose Moshe Eskol Asher Hu Oselam. So the father-in-law of Moses saw everything that he was doing to the people. Vayomer, and he said, Ma davar hazeh asher ata oselam. What is this matter that you are doing to the people? Matua ata yoshev uvadecha. Why are you dwelling by yourself? And all the people are standing above you from the morning until the evening. We have some delicious fruits over there if you're coming in late. So he says, why are you dwelling by yourself and all the people are standing over you? No. Moshe said to his father-in-law, Moshe said to his father-in-law, listen, the people are coming to me. People are coming to me to seek out the answers from Hashem. They're coming for judgment. Rashi says What does it mean? The people are coming. It's an present tense. To seek out God, Ketargumo. Like the Targum translates it, Mitba Ulpan, to ask for instruction. Mishal Talmud Mipiag Gvura, to ask for teachings from the mouth of Hashem. Verse 16. Ki yelem davar bai live the shafati ben ishu ben re'eo vodati asukei alokim as Torah. He said, when they have a matter, somebody comes to me and I'll judge between a man and his friend, and I will teach them the ways of God and his Torahs.
Rabbi, on verse 15,
yeah,
the Steinsaltz says, even if this encounter transpired before the beginning of the Torah, it's still logical they turned to him, and Moshe was the most senior figure, and inquiries of judicial matters were naturally directed to him. So we covered that earlier, but this seems to be.
Rabbi Steinsaltz is taking like a different approach to Rashi than Rashi. I said, thank you for pointing it out. I pointed out that Rashi is not the only approach here. It's somewhat controversial. Let's hear. This is the type of thing that Nechama Leibowitz, of blessed memory, that she would. Let's see if she has an essay on it. This is the type of thing she often comments on. Let's see. I don't know. She does not get into that. At least in this version, she just talks about other stuff. Thou shalt not covet.
And it's just maybe this is pedantic, but Steinsaltz doesn't seem to matter. He doesn't seem to be concerned that he's saying inquiries of a judicial matter were naturally directed to Moshe, even if there isn't a law.
Right.
So you can't really have a judicial inquiry if there isn't a law, right?
Even if you don't have the law, you have to. I don't agree with that. Even if you don't have the law, you're going to somebody who you trust for guidance, and they'll figure out what's fair. Like there's no law written down on the streets, but the people there have a code. So everybody has a code.
Right. That's right. It's like it's like in the wintertime when you shovel out your car and you get to put a comb there. There's a code. That's your spot.
Now we see the New Yorkers coming out.
That's the code.
That's New York City code. Now we got the New York boy coming out. I don't know if that code applies in DC, but in the Bronx, that was big time. Here, there's plenty of parking in Shep Park, but in the New York days, you put out the code, or if you park, by the way, if you just park in front of somebody else's house. One time, there was a guy, when I grew up in Staten Island, there was a guy who, he was not Jewish, and there was somebody else who parked in front of his house. Now, it was the street. Technically speaking, that spot did not belong to him. He still slashed the tires of the poor Yid who parked in front of his house. That's it, which, by the way, to me, is the dumbest thing in the world. Because if you slash the tires, how are you going to move the car? I mean, what are you thinking?
Fun.
My father was unimpressed with this neighbor.
But this is a misunderstanding sometimes that before Seres Adibus or Torah was given, people lived in this crazy anarchistic world, which is really a tremendous misunderstanding of history.
Yeah, of course.
There was natural law, there was organic law.
Case law.
No.
They must have had common law.
Yeah, they still do. And that's why you find a lot of laws in the Ten Commandments resonate with a lot of laws that exist universally.
Even, it's a very good point. Even Israel to this day doesn't have a constitution, right?
Right.
Yeah,
there was a guy here.
Problems with that.
There was a Washingtonian, Dr. Edelstein, tried to that was his life dream. And I was just thinking about it today. There's no constitution. And whatever happened, I mean, for a while he was a very hot commodity, but then kind of.
Yes, a very, very nice point. But the point is, they must have had some law. Why does Rashi say they had no law? Because you didn't need Moshe Rabbeinu to do common law cases. You needed, anybody could tell you what the case was. You needed Moshe Rabbeinu to tell you what the Torah was, what Hashem said.
Yes,
so they didn't have the Torah. until Moshe brought it down. But as Rabbi Yosef points out, they still did have the Moshe gave them the civil law. So what civil law did he give them? He must have told them the concept that you have to go to a judge, but he didn't have the Torah to give them. That's what we'd have to say.
Well, again, to be just reading Steinsaltz, literally it says, as I am their prophet, Moshe says, and know God's laws.
Right. So Rabbi Steinsaltz took the different approach. He's not following Rashi there. Does he have a footnote?
Maybe it's when it differs from the common law. Like Arba v'chamisha, that's only Torah law. There's no.
We need that 11 before Rashi. We need that work.
Here's a footnote.
Right, Rabbi.
The footnotes are in the back of the Chumash. The back.
Next week's parsha with Arba v'chamisha, that would be only Jewish law. There's no equivalent anywhere else, right?
Yeah, well, we don't know that. There could have been in Hammurabi. A lot of these laws that we think are unusual are also in like Hammurabi or whatever. So that specifically might be from the Hammurabi, the 4, the 5, the sheep of the 4 and the 5, next week's parsha.
But the Gemara says it's because of Busha, so
yeah,
that Hashem has mercy even on thieves.
Yeah,
that sounds very godly, you know.
My friends, let's take a moment to stop on a high note, and God willing, we'll